Welcome to the show. It's Monday, the 28th of February, and joining us this morning is author Gemma Forte and political commentator Albie Amankona. And we'll chat in just a moment, but first let me tell you what's on the show. Would you, as a British citizen, join the Ukrainian army and fight the Russians? After President Zelensky called on foreign nationals to join the war effort, the Foreign Secretary here said she would support anyone who chooses to do so. Would you do it? Would you encourage it? Then is it time to reintroduce fracking? The war in Ukraine has threatened European gas supplies, forcing some countries to reconsider where they get their energy from. Several MPs say this is an opportunity to reintroduce fracking in the UK. Do you agree? Then should you always split the bill on a date? A social media star has reignited this age-old debate after claiming it's sexist for women to pay. Kira Bria said the patriarchy has tricked women into thinking they should split the bill. Does she have a point? Or do you think everyone, whether they are straight or not, should go Dutch? Then it's our stories of the day, including Matt Hancock saying he didn't break the COVID rules when he had an affair. And after that, it's Jeremy Vine Extra with Storm.
It certainly is. We're going to be here with you all morning, a little bit into the afternoon, because at 11:15, Matt Stadlin and Lucy Beresford will be joining us for Jeremy Vine Extra, where we'll take more of your calls. So if you do want to get in touch this morning in any of our debates, that number is 0207 862 2222. That's 0207 862 2222. Calls from landlines may cost up to 16 pence per minute, plus any call set-up fees, and calls from mobiles may cost considerably more. To send us a message, though, head to Facebook or Twitter and search for Jeremy Vine on 5.
Thank you, Storm. And Albie, welcome to the show. It's great to have you.
Thanks for having me.
So if you're wondering about Albie's background, 28-year-old financial analyst and political commentator, which doing both is difficult, I'm assuming.
It is tricky. So, I mean, I guess when we normally think of the times when people watch TV, it's in the mornings or in the evenings, so I've got time to do that before and after work, and then my actual job during working hours.
But I suppose we are reminded by events in the world at the moment that, finances and politics are so linked.
Hugely linked. I mean, especially when we're looking at the sanctions which have been implemented against Russia, last week, and now we're seeing the effects of that on the Russian economy. The ruble's down. I think it's almost a third. Russia doesn't have access to its dollar reserves. So we really see that intersection between politics and finance, and we just have to hope that that alters Putin's decision-making. Yeah, well, let's talk about Putin. The war in Ukraine continues, and he's now on the front pages because he's made some sort of nuclear threat. So you can see this is the Mail here. World outrage as Putin makes the threat. And the Mail's doing a big fundraising drive, by the way, to help Ukraine. The Sun says mad Vlad goes nuclear, and on it goes. And the Star, always creative with their headlines. There's theirs. And the Times, Putin puts his nuclear force on alert. Is he bonkers? Speaking yesterday, you can see the whites of his eyes now and have a look and decide for yourself. The Russian president lashed out at NATO leaders as he said this.
Highest-ranking officials of the leading NATO countries are also allowing themselves to make aggressive statements in relation to our country. For this reason, I ordered the Minister of Defense and the Chief of General Staff to put deterrent forces of the Russian army on special combat standby duty.
Well, he's off his rocker, isn't he?
He's completely off his rocker. He's also utterly rattled because I think he thought he was going to go into Ukraine. It would be a done deal in about a day. And of course, the Ukrainians, as we've all seen, are not to be messed with. And it's, I think he's completely underestimated so many things. And actually seeing yesterday some young Russian soldiers who'd been taken captive by Ukrainians, and almost these master strokes that the Ukrainians do, which is that they took them in, they're like, phone your mum. And you've got these young, confused sort of Russian soldiers phoning their mothers. That is brilliant in so many ways, because a lot of people in Russia do not know what is going on. They put these huge signs up on all the motorways. So instead of saying the names of the places that you were going to, it said a very strong, rude swear word to the Russians. There's so much to talk about.
Did you see the film of the old lady who said to the Russian soldiers, take these sunflower seeds, so when you die, sunflowers will grow where you fell.
Yeah.
Wow. I thought that was so powerful.
Unbelievably powerful. Zelensky, who I think we all knew a little bit about him before. We all knew a bit about his background, how he'd come from comedy and acting and so on. Didn't know he'd won Strictly. Didn't know he was the Ukrainian voice of Paddington. And, if Putin kills him now, he's creating a martyr. And the world have collaborated. He is now feeling the force of these economic sanctions. So he's panicking. So he's going nuclear. But hopefully now the people around him might take him out.
Let's see. I mean, we can see whether that happens. Let's just take a look at our map, because, of course, possibly the reason that Putin has made this nuclear threat is because he's actually seeing much slower progress on this map than he'd hoped for. So the first thing to say is that, yes, OK, Russian forces are within 30 kilometres of Kiev, the capital of Ukraine, but they're not there yet. They're shelling it. They haven't taken it yet. That's a crucial thing to point out. They're also not yet in Kharkiv. Again, they're very close to that large city, but they haven't yet. They're coming from the east there. They're still Kharkiv under Ukrainian control. Where the Russians have had more success is down in the south. And this is because, as you can see, they took Crimea in 2014. They've come up through Crimea and taken Kherson and Melitopol, those two cities there. So the Russians are well and truly entrenched there. And obviously you'd expect them to be pretty strongly in place in the east, where there is a lot of sympathy for Russia because there's Russian speakers and so on there. One more place to show you. Chernobyl, we all know, because of the nuclear site. Now, that just north of here is where Ukrainian and Russian delegates are due to meet to hold peace talks. The Ukrainian government has expressed skepticism, some reports suggesting it's all smoke and mirrors from Putin, but they want to at least show willing. So I don't know whether the Ukrainian president will be there. I suspect not, but he'll send a team, they'll meet, they'll talk. Doesn't really help, does it, that Putin has said he's going nuclear, Gemma? That doesn't really help anybody.
No, it doesn't. And it genuinely is really, really frightening. Will he?
What do you think, Albie? Do you think this nuclear thing is a real threat?
I mean, it's a terrifying prospect, but it's always a real threat. That's why we have a nuclear deterrent. And it's also one of the reasons why I'm so glad it's that Boris Johnson, who is Prime Minister, and not Jeremy Corbyn, who wanted to get rid of Trident and who isn't a massive supporter of NATO, and actually signed that ridiculous Stop the War declaration, basically blaming what's going on in Ukraine at the moment on NATO. Outrageous.
But NATO, it's fascinating. This is a really tricky one for NATO because their great rule about we only defend our own members isn't working here, is it? Because clearly we've got huge amounts in common with Ukraine. We can't just leave them swinging in the wind.
I don't think we are leaving them swinging in the wind. We're doing pretty much everything short of actually putting boots on the ground in Ukraine, which, you know, Russia, you could argue, would see as an act of war. And if we're talking about the threat of nuclear war, then that'd probably argue that that makes that more likely. I do, however, think there's definitely a lot more that NATO members can be doing. We definitely need to be showing a sense of force on that NATO-Russia, NATO-Ukraine border to make it absolutely clear to Putin that if you do even have a thought that you want to invade one of the Baltic NATO states, don't do it.
Well, that might be coming. Who knows? Let's have a look. We've got protesters all over the world at the moment. And chiefly, one should say, in Russia. These people are brave because they've arrested about 2,000 protesters, the Russians. And there's UK and an awful lot going on there. Ukrainian flags there. Stop Putin's war. Protesters in Israel here. A lot of young people involved, of course. Spain. Protests here as well. Goodness, the Ukrainian flag is now famous, isn't it? And this is Italy as well. So a lot of people are out protesting. And I suppose, in a way, we've got to hope that something happens inside Russia. But one remembers the opposition leader's dead, the one 10 years ago. The other one's in jail. Yeah, they don't mess around.
And we know that from previous conflicts that when you take a leader out, you don't know what's going to come next. But that said, clearly Putin needs somebody to take him out. And actually, the things that the world are doing economically, they might not stop Putin himself, but it is applying massive pressure to the oligarchs and to those people, some of those people that surround him.
So do you think somebody, Roman Abramovich rings Putin and says, look, this isn't helping?
He might.
Do you think has he got the ability to do that?
You're going to have now Russian people going to their ATM machines and not being able to get money.
They
out.
are. That's exactly
already.
What's
They can't get their money out the wall.
Yeah, they can't get the money out the wall.
Across Russia at ATMs.
They're not going to be able to have access very soon to food. You know, the pressure is on.
All right. Well, let's see whether that gets us anywhere. It makes Putin, enables him to say we're fighting these horrible bullies in the West. That's the trouble. Storm, tell us about the show.
Well, we're starting off by asking if it's right for Brits to go and fight for Ukraine. Lots of people already been in touch this morning. Jonas tweeted saying, as a former soldier, if I was called up, I wouldn't hesitate. It's not right what's happening. The West should have anticipated this years ago and helped Ukraine prepare. Diana disagrees with that, though. She says this could add fuel to the fire. Putin may see it as British boots on the ground, even if they are Ukrainian by birth or descent. who knows how that bloke sees things. And David adds, untrained civilians will be useless on the battlefield. No worse, they will be a liability. So not for us going over there to support Ukraine. Whatever your thoughts on any of our debates this morning, remember, pick up that phone and do give us a call and keep those messages coming in too.
After the break, we're asking if you would go and fight in Ukraine. 0207 862 2222 is the number for you.
How many Bond films has Pierce Brosnan starred in? Is it A3, B4 or C5? Find out which after the break. Before the break, we asked how many Bond films has Pierce Brosnan starred in? And the answer is B4.
Go on, tell us which ones.
Do you think you could guess them?
Well, Die Another Day?
Yes.
The Living Daylights?
No.
No. Go on.
Goldfinger?
No.
Goldfinger? No.
That's
wrong. Sean Connery. GoldenEye.
GoldenEye, that's it.
Tomorrow Never Dies.
Oh, yeah, what was the one with the invisible car?
Is that The World Is Not Enough?
Yes, I don't know. Yeah, that was
That's
the worst one. Yeah, oh, that's interesting. Thank you. Welcome back. We're live on Channel 5 with Gemma and Albie. Later, we'll be asking if fracking should be reintroduced in the UK to try and sort out the energy problem caused by what's happening in Russia. But let's talk first about whether you would go to Ukraine and fight the Russians and whether you think the government should even encourage people to. 0207 862 2222. We'd love your call. On Saturday night, the Ukrainian president urged foreign fighters to join their war effort.
The people of Ukraine are fighting for freedom and democracy, not just for Ukraine, but for the whole of Europe, because that is what President Putin is challenging. And absolutely, if people want to support that struggle, I would support them in doing that.
So you support Britain, people from Britain, going over to Ukraine to help in the fight?
Absolutely, if that's what they want to do.
So that's our Foreign Secretary. Let's hear what the Ukrainian president said.
Every friend of Ukraine who wants to join Ukraine in defending the country, please come over. We will give you weapons.
Well, what about that? Because the idea that we could have freelance Brits going over to fight, does that sound right to you? Liz Truss's comments have raised eyebrows because what she's advocating is technically illegal. There's a thing called the Foreign Enlistment Act, which we'll come on to talking about in just a moment, and the history of that, because it bans British citizens from fighting with any country at peace with the UK. Let's talk first to Jeff Dowie, who's in Kiev with his Ukrainian wife, Tetiana. You've been there for 5 years, Jeff. How are you doing?
All's great, Jeremy. Good morning. Nice to speak to you. I've been here on and off for 5 years after marrying Tanya, yes.
Well,
lovely city.
We're thinking of you, and we know the Russians are close. We hear 30 kilometres, but I'm hoping it's calm and safe where you are.
Well, we are in the centre of Kiev, and it's a bit of a ghost town at the minute. We're surrounded actually now by the Russian army. We hear explosions and gunfire, and area sirens are going off on a regular basis. But as of yet, we haven't actually seen the war on our streets close to us. We know they're getting closer and closer every day, but so far, not here just yet.
Tanya, how are you doing?
How are you, my love?
Nearly okay. Today is enough calm. Only one siren in the morning. So now we hope it will negotiate, will be okay.
Jeff, we're talking about this issue of people fighting, and obviously the British Army won't come because then that's apparently the Third World War. But individual Brits travelling out, maybe people from your hometown of Belfast, do you think that's a good idea?
I don't think war or fighting on any level is a good idea, but this war has enraged so many people. And let's be honest, people from my hometown of Belfast have been looking for a fight this last 40 years. We've been fighting with ourselves. So I don't know. It's one of those situations, if the individual wants to come out, who are we to say is wrong, you know?
I guess from the point of view of the Ukrainians or the Ukrainian government, they're encouraging it now.
Yes, well, they are under siege and they are vastly outnumbered by the Russian forces. And I can understand why they would welcome any help. It's, the war is wrong. What Putin is wrong. He set brother against brother and friend against friend. But the Ukrainians are definitely beleaguered, just for the sheer weight of numbers. But they are putting up a great fight. And I was saying to my wife that it's given me a bit of a better understanding of my grandfather, just the dedication and the commitment of the young men here fighting the Russians. He would have been a similar situation when he was 18 and went off to fight at the Somme. So whenever you see oppressors, vile oppressors, what do you do as a man of honour? Do you just sit down and ignore them and say it's somebody else's problem, or you go and give them support?
Well,
it's up to the individual.
Thank you. So I hope you stay safe, both of you. Thank you so much for talking to us, Jeff, Dowie and Tanya. Thank you. Best wishes.
Okay, thank you, Jeremy.
There we are, in Kiev, live from Kiev. The Russians are not yet in the city. So let's just talk about this issue of whether it's legal to go and join a war as a freelance, effectively. And have a look, because it's all about something called the Foreign Enlistment Act. Now, that has established a principle more than 100 years old, which is this: if you pick up a weapon on a foreign battlefield as a citizen of the UK, you become a terrorist. And that's at the heart of this act. Let me explain where it comes from, right? There were two big events in the 1800s which concerned the British government. One was where Spain was being fought in South America, these wars of independence, and a load of Brits travelled in to South America to fight the Spanish, and the British government was a bit uncomfortable with that. And also, interestingly, Napoleon attacks Prussia, 1806, and again, Brits were outraged, and they went in their hundreds to defend Prussia against Napoleon. And in both these cases, the British government was embarrassed, and it brought in this thing we're talking about, the Foreign Enlistment Act, which brought in this principle, right? So from now on, from that point on, in the 1800s, you can't go and join a foreign war. Until this happens, 1936 to 39, and the Spanish government, which is elected, is deposed by its generals, led by the famous guy Franco, who ended up running the country. And you have this war of essentially anti-fascist war, where a lot of volunteers came, a lot of internationalists, including the author George Orwell. They were defeated. This is a very famous photo of one of them, freedom fighters being shot on the battlefield. But the government thought the cause is just here. We can't prosecute these people like Orwell who went to fight. So here we go. We wind forward through the Spanish Civil War to 2022. And you have these two brothers here, two Brits who are now in Ukraine, Sean Pinner and Johnny Wood, who are both contracted soldiers now with the Ukrainian army. And the question for the government, Gemma, is going to be, does it use that act to prosecute people like them? What do you think?
Well, what I think is that the job of the Foreign Secretary is to know detail like this. So when she made that statement that we watched, which I thought was weird anyway, because she was talking like she had someone talking in her ear, and it was, I'm not a Foreign Secretary, so I was like, huh? But I thought that sounds a strange thing to say with absolutely no context or advice. It's very irresponsible and gung-ho. Cut to, a couple of hours later, David Davis coming out going, no, it's illegal. You just think she should know that. You know, we're in this situation. The calibre of politician needs to be better, quite frankly.
Well, it may be that in a funny way, Albie, you're looking at that history, maybe it isn't illegal anymore. Maybe the act has lapsed in a funny way.
The Act hasn't actually been enacted since 1896 for exactly the reasons that we have discussed before. And it was actually the MP, Sir Bob Neal, who mentioned that, I think it was yesterday. And I think in defence, the defence of Liz Truss would be the same one about the anti-fascists in Spain, is that what she is saying, that if people want to go out to the Ukraine and defend liberty, democracy and freedom, that's not that different.
But then why,
to
when
the
it was
anti-fascist war in
Syria
Spain.
and people wanted to go and fight Assad, it was a completely different line. It was like, if you do that, the government will come down on you, or the full force.
Yeah, and you could even say Shamima Begum, part of the legal action against her is based on the idea that she joined a war abroad.
And you can't decide whether you fundamentally support the war or not and then change your mind unequivocally on the law behind it.
But we'll leave aside the act, is it right to go, Albie? What do you think?
I think that it should be up to individuals to make a choice as to whether or not they want to go and do something incredibly risky to go and fight for freedom, democracy and liberty on the fringes of Europe. It's down to individuals. But when it comes to breaking the law, obviously we can't be encouraging people to go and break the law, but this law hasn't been enforced since 1896.
But if you had a friend who said to you, Albie, I'm thinking of going, would you say don't?
If it was just a normal civilian who had no military training, I would ask him or her how helpful they genuinely thought they could be.
The same. If it was my brother and he was all sort of, fine, I want to go and help, I would say, don't. You won't be a help, you'll be a hindrance. You don't know how to use a gun. And I think people like Tobias Ellwood, who's so sensible, and Tom Tugendhat, they've come out, they're like, got to be really, really careful with this one. This is the safety of our people. If you are trained, it is a different thing. And the Ukrainians have made a process, I think, for funneling people and getting this fight organised. So that's not beyond the realms. But if you're just someone down the pub, don't do it.
Well, you might see freelancers going. I'm sure you will. Storm, what are viewers saying?
We're going to speak to Steve from Devon first, who thinks we should be equipping Brits who are willing to go and fight.
So would you go? How old are you?
65. But I'm not in good health. But the reason that I phoned you is because I think myself, it's all right I'm turning around and saying, I've got my telly turned down so I can't hear you. It's all right I'm turning around and saying, oh, you can go, you can go. I've seen people on here that have gone in, as like the backup, and all they've done is put a yellow ribbon around their arm. I think the least that they can do, if they're going to give him permission to go, is to give them boots, jacket and helmet. Give them the gun when they get there and make sure they've got some degree of some form of training. Yeah. Whether it's any form of training whatsoever. But don't just... I remember, I think it was in the 80s, there was a coup in Africa and the government didn't back it up. And they were queuing up coats loads of blokes who, I'll go and fight. And there were 20-odd got killed.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to remember what that was. Maybe Sierra Leone. I don't know. But I suppose in the end, it's their individual choice, as Albie was saying. If you feel you can offer something.
This is sanctioned by the government. The government's saying you can go.
Yeah, that's true. And it will encourage some people. And there'll be people who think they can become heroes. And it may well not be like that.
Well, that's what you've got to vet. Don't just, if they want to if the gunga holes want to go, let them use the passport and their own money. If they're going to go, as she suggested, then help them.
OK, Steve, thank you very much. Right, after the break, more calls on this. Would you enlist in the Ukrainian army? Would you go and fight the Russians? Or should the government actually say, wait, nobody go until we work out the ground rules here? Because it might well be that people are already starting and thinking of going there. 0207 862 2222. We'll see you shortly.
What were jelly babies originally called when they were first made in 1864? Were they called A, precious babies, B, newborn babies, or C, unclaimed babies? Find out which after the break. Before the break, we asked what were jelly babies originally called, and the answer is C, unclaimed babies.
Question. Whose questions are they today?
They're Olivia's questions today, but I thought that was quite horrendous. But actually, there's a bit of a story that goes behind it. Not that Olivia wrote the questions, just the question itself. So back in 1864, Fry's, which I suppose was Fry's of Lancashire, anyway, they were asked to make a confectionery of little jelly bears. Unfortunately, when they came out, they looked more like babies, so they just came up with the name unclaimed babies, which they then changed because they realised it was a bit ghoulish.
Yeah, OK, thank you. Gemma and Albie are with us this morning. Later we'll be asking if it's time to reintroduce fracking and should you always split the bill on a date. Now they're your calls on whether British citizens should enlist in the Ukrainian army and fight the Russians. The Foreign Secretary has said she backs anyone who wants to go. The MP Tobias Ellwood, who's got military experience, though, is saying, this is his tweet here. He says, we say no to tasking the NATO alliance, but now endorse UK civilians with no military training to go and fight? Please do not go if you have no combat experience. You may get yourself and others who have to look after you killed. Storm, what are people saying?
We're going to go back to the calls now and speak to Bill from Manchester.
Go on, Bill, what do you think?
I think it's absolutely horrible and horrendous. The Soviet Union as it was then, not the gangster state it is now, lost 24 million dead. They were our allies for years. And I know many comrades in the Labour Party, Communist Party, people like Maury Levitas who joined at 15. They had to sneak across the borders because they would have been arrested if they'd have been caught. Because
Bill, sorry, I'm confused. Yeah. You said the Soviet Union were our allies for years?
They were during the war, yes.
Oh, I see. Back in the Second World War, right? Yeah.
Indeed,
okay.
It was.
Sort
the
of,
Ukraine
yeah.
for 200 to 300 years is under the Great Russian Empire. Yeah. I use the word great in the same way as I do about Britain, great because of empire and all the rest that goes with that.
Well, I mean, it turned a bit awkward after the Second World War, didn't it? That's the thing. So.
Well, that's because they declared they were a pariah. Churchill even said, joking or semi-jokingly, we need to A-bomb Moscow. Absolutely ridiculous. They've been our allies. So the Warsaw Pact countries were actually a response to NATO. NATO has always been, and CENTO and CETO, the other ones in different parts of the world, a part of the US war machine.
What's your problem with fighting Russians if they've invaded Ukraine? What's your problem with doing that?
Russia were our allies.
Yeah, but that's then.
The people of Russia are not our enemies. And I don't think they're the enemies. Quite a number of those Russians you'll probably find will go across and they were holding their hands up this morning, not wanting to fight, showing the Ukrainians.
Yeah, but if
they were told lies by Putin, surprise, surprise.
True, but yeah, you know, the brutal Bill, the brutal reality is if you put on a uniform for Putin and you go and fight his war, you probably deserve to die, don't you?
Do you? Do kids deserve to die, 18, 20, called up, conscripted?
That's life.
Who don't understand it?
That's the way it goes.
Who don't grasp the issues?
Yep. Well,
this is not just the brutality of war. We never learn from that.
I know, but if you're Ukrainian, the answer is yes. Gemma?
I agree. The Russians need to be defeated, but I also agree, Bill, when you see these young Russian lads who don't really know why they're there, there's a lot of reports coming out that they've been told they're going for rehearsal practice drills and then they've ended up in Ukraine not knowing where they are. No, some of them, genuinely, I think the EU should get together. If there are 27 countries, they could offer about 5,000 Russian soldiers each. They could go, if you stop fighting, come and have a passport.
I haven't heard that suggestion before. Thank you, Bill. The idea that instead of offering refugee status to Ukrainians, we offer it to Russian soldiers. We say, look, you've gone west, just keep going. Take off your uniforms and you can have a home. That's the strangest way to win a war I've ever heard.
It is a bit of an odd way to win a war, and I also think...
I'm not saying it's the only way.
I love your idea, though.
It's definitely an innovative idea, and it's very outwardly box thinking. But I think that these Russian young men who will have been sent to the front line in Ukraine will have been brainwashed with Putin's propaganda.
Some will, yes.
The last thing that they want to do is come and live in the Western European...
Okay.
Some will, but
all right,
not all.
Let's get another call. Storm.
Someone that thinks allowing Brits to fight is ridiculous is Andrew from South Yorkshire.
So you wouldn't go, Andrew?
Absolutely not. I think it's just throwing petrol on the fire, really, isn't it? It was supposed to be de-escalating, not escalating.
Well, it's too late for
I'd like to just comment on something you said earlier about if Russians put a uniform on, do they deserve to die in the country? Well, you know, I'm a Brit. How would it be seen if we thought the same about British soldiers who died in Iraq? We invaded Iraq, a sovereign nation that hadn't directly threatened us.
I think that's very different. If you, I mean, let's not get caught on this particular thing, but you know,
how do we define it as different? The Russians are doing something that they perceive to protect their interests. Whether you agree with it or not, but we've done the same and far worse, and we seem to think that's okay.
Yeah, but I mean, the idea that you can't shoot Russians because they may not know why they're there is preposterous, isn't it?
What's interesting is that the world has progressed so much and Putin hasn't. So I think Merkel said he's like a 19th century leader in the 21st century. Yeah. And so this idea of tanks and boots on the ground, you know, this is the first time we're really feeling like it's back to the Second World War. And so I think the world has changed so much. But I do think the world is coming together, and I'm just such an optimist. I hope these sanctions
Do you? Well, it's great to see, even at the football yesterday, seeing the support for Ukraine. Storm.
We're going to speak to Warren now from Fife.
What do you think, Warren?
Firstly, as about the NATO thing, I mean, I'm ex-military. Me, my brother and my cousin have got over 60 years between. Some of them more than others, but there you go. The first thing is, with NATO going in, this is the job of the UN to deal with this. So now the next thing is, as for Brits going over to fight there, I seem to recall, like you said earlier on there, Jeremy, that if you're not in an enlisted unit and you go to fight for another country, you're either a terrorist, an unlawful combatant, a murderer using IEDs. But does that only count when it's brown people fighting for brown people we don't like, not when it's white people fighting for white people we do like?
Well, there seems to be a different standard. Yeah, that's true.
Absolutely, there
I guess. But I mean, in the end, look, if we're just looking at Ukraine, I don't think they're going to prosecute anyone who goes over there. The question is whether they should go. It sounds like you wouldn't go.
No, I wouldn't. Well, it depends. See, I mean, you've got the resistance and the partisans from the war, and it was quite right. But the point I'm getting at is it's the double standards. It's just
okay.
It's interesting. The army men are all saying don't.
Yeah. Go on.
But just to quickly come back on the point about it being white people versus white people and brown people versus brown people, I'm not aware of anyone being prosecuted for going to fight in Syria either. So that would seem to turn that point on its head.
OK, thank you for your calls on this. Later, should you always split the bill on a date? After the break, though, is it time to reintroduce fracking? We're covering all subjects today, aren't we? 0207 862 2222. We'll frack after the break. See you then.
In Roald Dahl's Matilda, how is Miss Trunchbull related to Miss Honey? Is it A, she's her mother, B, her aunt, or C, her cousin? Find out which after the break. Before the break, we asked in Roald Dahl's Matilda, how is Miss Trunchbull related to Miss Honey? And the answer is B, she's her aunt.
Thanks for being with us this morning. Author Gemma Forte and political commentator Albie Amankona are with us. Let's remind you what's still coming up. In a moment, is it time to reintroduce fracking? Some MPs think it is the way to reduce energy bills and ensure a stable supply of gas as war rages in Eastern Europe. Do you agree? We're taking your calls 020 7862 2222. And then, should you always split the bill on a date? One social media star says women should never pay, and doing so is an effect of the patriarchy. But should people, regardless of their sexuality or gender, always pay their way on a date? Always go Dutch. Then we got our stories of the day, including a ban on MPs asking how Prince Andrew funded his settlement and why pharmacists could save the NHS millions. And then it's Jeremy Vine Extra with our storm.
It certainly is at 11:15. We'll be joined by Matt Stadlin and Lucy Beresford. It gives us another hour to hear more of your calls, and we'll be asking if we all have a duty to take in Ukrainian refugees. Now, if you do want to get in touch on any of our debates this morning, that number, as always, 0207 862 2222. That's 0207 862 2222. Calls from landlines may cost up to 16 pence per minute, plus any call set-up fees, and calls from mobiles may cost considerably more. You can also send us a message. Head to Facebook or Twitter and search for Jeremy Vine on 5.
Thank you, Storm. Now, we've spoken at length about the horrors currently unfolding in Ukraine, but there's something I saw yesterday that might just make you smile a little. So it's a picture of a cyclist in Kiev. You can have a look. He's just going about his business here, cycling with a tank in the distance. And then somebody's tweeted a remark complimenting him. Let's just have a look at the tweet here. So it says, in Kiev, a guy just kept his normal routine and went for a bike ride surrounded by tanks, right? First reply. Cyclists think they own the road even in a war. Why would anyone say that? Why? What do you think, Storm?
It's just interesting how triggered you are by that
I
comment.
was really triggered. So I then say, imagine being the person who tweets this reply. So I put that up.
Should there have been a trigger warning?
Yeah, there should. It should have a trigger warning, yeah. So anyway, there we go. Good luck to the guy on the bicycle. OK, your calls, please. Is it time to reintroduce fracking? 0207 862 2222. Tell us what you think. A group of Conservatives want the ban to be lifted as energy bills continue to soar and the war in Ukraine threatens Europe's supply of natural gas. In a letter to the Prime Minister, 29 Tory peers and MPs said fracking provided a safe and reliable alternative to imported shale gas. The government says fracking presents an unpredictable risk to buildings and the environment, though, and they stress that Russian gas only accounts for about 4% of our gas supply. Let's just remind ourselves what fracking is. It's a strange old word, isn't it? But it's basically, if I show you this chart here, you can see exactly how it works. I would say, by the way, at the bottom it says not to scale. So the actual fracking device is bigger than this screen here. So you have a well above the ground and then a pipe goes down. And basically what you do is you throw a load of water really hard with chemicals and sand downwards into the ground with enormous force, OK? And when it hits this area down here, it breaks the earth, the soil up into what are called fissures here. And out of that broken area of ground comes the gas. Comes the gas that then comes back up the pipe. I've always wondered with fracking, this is my question, is how it is you put the water and the sand down the same pipe that the gas comes up. But essentially the gas flows out. That's it. That's it. And it's a high pressure process. And the problem is that if you get a lot of fissures and fracking and cracking down here, you can get a bit of a tremor, Gemma.
Yes, you can.
A tremor, Gemma.
What is a tremor, Gemma? You can get more than a tremor. You can get an earthquake.
But you don't like it, do you?
No, I don't think that this is the answer at all. And I was very interested when I saw politicians such as Steve Baker saying, right, you know, because of the reliance in parts of Europe on Russian gas, we actually, the UK, only have about 4% of our gas. We go to Norway mainly to get our gas. But countries like Germany, hugely reliant. So the price of gas, it's a world market, so we are all affected. But the trouble is, there are so many arguments not to do it, and many of them are economic. It's not just the environment, which I'll get to in a second. So OPEC are the oil conglomerate who determine the price of a barrel of oil, OK? And fracking is a really expensive way of getting oil out of the ground if you're in the North Sea. It's much, much easier if you're somewhere like Abu Dhabi or Saudi Arabia, where it's
gas, not oil, isn't it? But yeah.
Yes, but OK, so gas, but to frack.
Is it expensive? Because I don't know. What do you just before you go, Albie? What do you think about that? Because it's too expensive to do it.
That's not an argument that I've heard anti-fracking. And there are many anti-fracking arguments, but not that the process itself is too expensive to make it economically viable. Maybe I'm not as well read as you. But I think the point is, when it comes to fracking and what MPs like Steve Baker are saying, is that if Europe had a more independent energy policy,
yes,
it would have been able to act more swiftly on sanctions against Russia, rather. And that's a really important point. And don't you think it's better that we get our gas from within British territory rather than importing it from...
But that's the issue, isn't it?
Yeah, so 10, 12 years ago, the government were told to concentrate more on renewables, but also storage. So we don't have any storage for gas here, and they haven't seen to that. So that's part of the issue. So, for instance, America now completely self-sufficient, OK? But also fracking works there because they're a completely different landscape. So they don't really have to worry about the issues to public health because they can do it in the middle of these vast...
There was talking of tremors, Gemma, there was a tremor in Blackpool, wasn't there?
There was a tremor in Blackpool.
Now, that did upset people.
Yes, it did
in Blackpool. And once you've got anything that sounds like it could be a version of an earthquake,
yeah,
you've basically got to cancel it. Haven't you, Albie, or not?
It did upset people in Blackpool, and this is actually the main issue with fracking, in my opinion, is about how do we bring the communities with us who are going to be affected by shale gas exploration by the means of fracking. And it's not just because of tremors that make people unhappy, it's the way that these companies like Cordrilla treat people who just walk their dogs near their site. And there, I think there were one site down in Sussex and one site up in Lancashire. But the fundamental point is, and I hope you'll agree with this, Gemma, is that we need to have a more independent energy policy in Europe.
Yeah.
And some of that should come from, most of it should come from renewables. Some of it should come from nuclear. But we do need gas. We've got gas stoves, gas central heating. And where do we get that gas from? Better to get it from the United Kingdom, surely.
Not if it is going to be ruining habitats.
So where do we get it from?
Ruining animals. Well, we get like 95% of it from other countries. So we could still keep getting it from Norway. I don't think we're going to be going to war with Norway anytime soon.
But if it ruins habitats in Norway, isn't that the same as ruining them here?
Well, I personally think we need to be looking at harnessing solar, harnessing wind power.
But the problem with that, Gemma, is that when we talk about renewables, it also, what happens when the sun isn't shining or the wind stops blowing? You need fossil fuels or you need nuclear to back it up. Now, it takes a very long time to build nuclear power capacity. And in that interim period, we are going to have to still use fossil fuels for the times that we can't generate energy from renewables. And where do you want to get that fossil fuel from?
To give a new licence for fracking takes 10 years to come into place, so it's not that short term. But the trouble is what you've got is these fracking machines sat there waiting, and these particular politicians, I suspect, have donors or have some kind of investment in that, so they want to get them driving again. And I don't think that's the best motivation, especially slightly exploiting the situation on the global stage. So because there's a major humanitarian crisis unfolding does not mean that climate action should just be relegated.
That's not what anyone is suggesting. And I resent the fact that you're saying that, MPs like Steve Baker, who I know really well, are doing this because they've got donors. That's not why.
But climbing wholesale gas prices are happening right now. But at any point they could go down, and then it makes fracking just not a viable.
OK, let's get calls on this. Should we start fracking, Storm?
Well, apparently we need to keep all our energy options open. That's according to Derek from Northamptonshire, who's on the line now.
Derek, who are you agreeing with here? We've got quite a disagreement in the studio.
I'm agreeing with the gentleman on your right.
Albie, yeah.
Yeah.
Great, yeah. Tell us why.
Well, I believe that our ever-increasing demands for electric power will mean that we've got to really consider all our options, whether it be wind or solar or nuclear or natural gas, which could involve fracking. And our government wants to build hundreds of thousands of more houses, all of which are going to demand electric power. And all our means of transport are going electric, whether it's road or rail or even air. So I think the time will come, sooner or later, we'll have to consider all our options, including fracking.
Yeah. All right, Derek, thank you. Storm.
We're going to speak to Robin now from Cumbria.
Hi, Robin.
Hello, Jeremy.
You don't think Ukraine's can be used as a reason to frack?
No, I think it'll be a travesty if we let politicians use Ukraine as a reason to return to fracking. We're an island nation. We're surrounded by sea and wind. We can have renewables. We can throw nuclear into the situation, which is a clean energy. Fracking's fossil fuels and gases. They're an old technology, and we shouldn't return to them.
Are you somebody? I'm just thinking in Cumbria, you might have had some fracking near you. Have you or not?
Not that I'm aware of. Not that I'm aware of. I think it was maybe in Lancashire somewhere, but
it was, yeah.
It really is. It's a outdated process, burning fossil fuels. And one of your panel said everything's going to be electric, so we can have renewable energy, and it can create tens of thousands of jobs, retrofitting houses. You know what I mean? We led the Industrial Revolution around the world, and we can lead the rest of the world with green, renewable energy.
I hear you, but yes, okay, thank you. I just wondered when you said that sometimes the wind stops blowing, and
exactly, and this is the point. This is the problem. We've been sold this idea that we can generate 100% of our energy from renewable. That is not possible.
Or even with the tides, I just think the tides. You go up the north of Scotland, the power of the sea. My God.
And I think a lot of people can see that and think there has to be some way of harnessing it, but as the panel's already said, we haven't quite got that technology.
The problem of storing the energy once they've kind of harvested it, then they can't keep it at the moment. But as your caller said, this is fracking contaminates water.
Does it?
Yeah, it does, and it can release carcinogenic chemicals into the air, cause earthquakes.
I was in Blackpool half-term week. Brought my daughter up to Blackpool. There were no earthquakes, but there was Eunice and Dudley paid a visit, and I was passing a wind farm, so they had all the they had 10 windmills.
They were stationary.
5 of them were.
Well, they have to be when it's too strong.
Well, I couldn't work it out. Why? But 5 of them were moving and 5 of them were stationary.
So apparently when the wind is too strong, they stop moving, and when the wind is not there, they stop moving. So it has to be the right level of wind. It's like the right rain when we're watching.
I was trying to work out why would half of them be moving?
They've bought too many, so they've invested in all these wind farms. What they haven't solved is how then to store the energy that they're getting from them. So it needs loads of work and it needs loads of conversation, and everything is a bit long term.
But this is the point, Gemma. We do the battery technology isn't there. I would love the battery technology to be there. It just isn't. And if we think about the surface area that some of these battery fields take up, or solar panels take up, compared to a nuclear power station, or God forbid, a gas or a coal power station, it takes up a lot more space, and we just need to wait until the technology gets there. And whilst we're waiting, unfortunately, we're going to have to use fossil fuels.
OK, we'll talk. Let's have another call. We were discussing the return of the gasworks. We were saying that, you know, people used to say, oh, my house has ruined the view of the gasworks. Well, we miss them now. Now they've taken all the gasworks out.
I think people that live there maybe don't.
But that's where we used to store it all.
We're going to speak to somebody that also thinks we should focus on renewables, Linda from Somerset.
Hi, Linda. Well, yeah, we're talking about fracking. What do you think of fracking?
Good morning. I don't agree with fracking particularly because of the chemicals and the water table, but I think the government could give grants or loans to fit solar panels on people's roofs.
Linda, it's more urgent than that. We've got a possible problem with our gas supply in the next few months. We haven't got enough sun to create energy, the sort of energy to replace the gas we need. I don't know what the solution is, Linda. That's all. You're thinking we go solar?
Well, yeah, most houses could have solar panels,
right,
and you can store the electric. You can have a battery that stores the electric, so you can use it at night if you want.
Okay, I wasn't really aware of that. I thought I've got 6 solar panels. I send this tiny amount back to the grid or something.
You know what's amazing is obviously Germany are really reliant on this Russian gas, and they've put a halt to that big gas pipe, haven't they?
Nord Stream.
So they really are going to be in trouble. It is only 4% of our UK gas supply.
Interesting. Sorry, Linda, I don't want to cut you off. Where are you on nuclear, Linda? Because people say nuclear is really clean as well, as long as it doesn't explode.
Well, I don't like nuclear because of the storage.
The storage? Yeah.
Yeah, the storage of contamination storage.
The Uranian rods and all that, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
We've got waves as well, haven't we?
Wave
why
power?
We're not using waves. The panel mentioned it, but why we're not using wave power, I do not understand.
No, thank you very much. Have we built stuff that the tidal devices, are they...
I don't. If we have, they certainly not working to full capacity.
No.
I think that's the problem with renewables. Is we went out there and tried to find this technology, and we've just not been very good at making something that's.
I'm told they use tidal in Shetland, but of course one of the problems is you can get an enormous amount of power generated, but you then have to run it back on land via a cable.
I see.
And as Albie says, you've got to run it somewhere else.
Yes.
And then store it somehow.
The trouble is politics is short-termist and it's not a vote winner. Not enough people care, and so it's never been a priority.
I think
as I say, for the last 15 years, more people definitely, but there are loads of people who don't care.
Oh, the 80s they were thinking of doing some nuclear and it all went wrong. Yeah. OK, thank you, Linda, for your call.
We're going to speak to Ian now from North Ayrshire.
This is great hearing from lots of callers. What do you think, Ian? Fracking.
Not very clever. The thing is, we are such a small island. We've got more people coming daily. We're in danger of sinking. We don't have the wide open range like North America, where the impact of fracking would be marginal.
Yep.
The other point is, who knows about the technology? Very few people. The politicians look for votes. The fracking companies want to make money, so there's no independent assessments of the deteriorating landscape of this wonderful fracking thing.
Fracking, apparently the bit above the ground when you frack is not very big at all. It's, you can hide it with a couple of artificial trees. How do you want to generate energy, Ian? Because you've got to get it somehow.
Well, actually, nuclear has been the remedy for successive 4-year or 5-year governments of different persuasions and we haven't grasped the nettle. We should be like Germany, who has nuclear power stations, and even more so France, our near neighbour.
I think Germany have shut theirs because of Fukushima.
Exactly.
Anyway, Ian, thank you. Wow, we had a debate on energy. I mean, there's no clear answer.
No, there certainly isn't, and there isn't online either. Helen's tweeted saying, "Time the world got together and provided every man, woman and child on the planet with cheap green energy instead of making dodgy businessmen more wealthy and powerful." George says all fuel sources must be reconsidered. The green levy should also be suspended due to rampant fuel costs. And Fliss reckons if people want gas and electricity, they have to accept the ugly side. People moaned that wind farms were an eyesore, and now fracking they don't like. They moan about everything, but they love the fuel.
So true. Later it's Jeremy Vine Extra, where Matt Stadlen and Lucy Beresford will join Storm. After the break, though, should you always split the bill on a date? 0207 862 2222. We'll see you in a moment or two.
In Greek mythology, who was born by emerging fully grown from Zeus's head? Was it A, Hermes? Was it B, Aphrodite? Or was it C, Athena? Find out which after this short break. Before the break, we asked in Greek mythology who was born by emerging fully formed from Zeus's head? And the answer is C, it was Athena.
Back, Gemma and Albie are with us. Later is our stories of the day. Find out which famous novel has been given a content warning because it contains descriptions of disturbing fishing. First, though, your calls on this. Should you always split the bill on a date? 0207 862 2222. We'd love to hear from you. Get your calls. A TikTok star called Kira Brea said women should never split the bill on a date with a man, and here's why.
The fact that men expect 50-50 from women when women don't get 50% of anything. 50% of the money, 50% of the privilege, 50% of the safety, 50% of the space they're allowed to take up. It benefits men to say, oh yeah, I'm feminist. I believe in women paying 50-50 on dinner dates. And that is the only time they believe in equality.
Wow, so this got us thinking, should you always split the bill on a date, whether you are a woman or not? Gemma? What do you think?
I'm just thinking about what she just said. It's quite an interesting perspective, isn't it? And much of what she said is correct. I can only answer this in a very personal way. So this isn't like an intellectual argument. I can only go on how I feel, and I'm probably really old-fashioned, but it is so nice when you go on a date and the man offers to pay. Maybe that's just because I'm my age.
What about if he assumes he's paying?
Even nicer.
Oh, really?
It's just lovely. But that said, I don't assume. So. And also, especially if you're just going for a drink, but if they'd invited me for dinner and then they were like, go and get your card out, that would feel a bit stingy. But then most first dates aren't a dinner. Most first dates are a coffee or a drink, and, you might buy each other a drink or just go halves or whatever. But if he was like, oh, I'll get these, that's a really lovely thing. I argued this with my right-on daughter. Oh, Mum, you're so sexist, you're so whatever. And so I was like, I've got to come up with a reason. I'm thinking maybe it's subliminal because we are animals, and biologically, as a straight woman, you're meeting a man, not anymore, but to procreate. Ugh, not anymore. But the point is,
yes,
if something happens between you and you procreate and you have a baby, at that point, you're out of action. You are out of action for a little bit, Storm. I hate to tell you. You are sitting there and you are feeding. This is your job. And then the man needs to look after you. You look after you, make you a cup of tea.
Yes.
Stop the visitors coming around. All of that stuff.
See that.
So maybe that's my excuse.
Okay. What do you think, Albie? Just 50-50 on every date?
I found that whole thing very confusing. I just found what you said a little bit confusing. Look, well, I'm gay and I'm glad that I don't have to deal with any of this nonsense. I just think that really the person who earns the most money should be paying for the dinner. And surely the mark of a good date is that one of you pays for dinner and the other one pays for breakfast.
You don't know what someone earns on the first date. I mean, yes, you're
right.
What
about the one who earns the most pays? Storm, where are you on that?
I don't think you can base it on that. I think generally if somebody's asked somebody else out, whatever the situation, even if you're just friends, the other person kind of pays. I don't, like with my friends, I like when I go out and I take my friend out and I'll pay because I'm treating them or I'm looking after them or it was my invite or it was, whatever. I don't like this splitting everything. I remember going out, this was a date situation, and the bill came and the guy said, that's £17.50. And just the fact they had to split the last pound, I thought, oh, don't think you're going to be looking after me if we end up together and we're having children. I don't think you'll want to look after me.
There it is, the same thing.
I think there is an element of, but at the same time, I always had back when I was dating, I had a system where if I wanted to see the person again, I would let them pay, and then the next day I would pay. So I would get theatre tickets, or I would do something else special to make sure that they went out with me on the second date. And then, so it was always kind of split, but date by date. If it was an okay date, but I wasn't that interested in seeing them again, I might split it. If it was a terrible date, then I'd pay the bill just to make sure he knew when he takes a girl out the next time how he's supposed to do it.
Oof. So what if the person you're on the date with says, I'll pay, like in that sort of way, that means I never want to see you again?
If I said it, that's what it was saying.
Wow. Storm.
No, don't worry about this, I'll get it, and then I'm off-ski.
Yeah. Are we any clearer now, Albie? Do you think?
That's pretty savage, Storm. But I mean,
yeah, it is.
I feel like it's a
They
good
got a free meal out
tactic,
it.
It's pretty savage.
In your single years, which are behind us now,
They are behind me, yeah.
there were a few incidents where you had this crop up, did you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Like the guy that said £17.50, I just said, do you know what? I'll just get it. Don't worry about it. I'll get it. And I left and never responded to anything.
I think also it's not necessarily a mercenary thing. Generosity is a really attractive, nice quality in people.
On anyone.
But there's been a couple of women, when I've talked about things like this before, who've said, oh, but the thing is, then if the man pays it, you might feel that you then owe them something. I do not believe that either. You don't.
All right, the TikTok was basically, and we should talk about this theme, which is the idea that men have gone from being told to open the door for women to basically a situation where women say, we want equality. So they now say, well, I'm not opening the door for you then, love. That's the problem here, isn't it? And what do you think about that, Albie? That men have taken advantage of feminism to basically stop being polite.
I don't think that's true. I still hold the door open for people.
Don't they get offended?
Well, they shouldn't get offended. It's never happened to me that someone has been offended by it in the past. Maybe it will happen in the future.
You know, there's a whole etiquette book on this, and I was looking up what do you do in a revolving door, because there's issues there, right? Because obviously you can't let the woman go in first because the man should push. That's the theory, okay, old-fashioned theory. So the actual, do you know what the etiquette is for a revolving door?
No.
Is the man goes in first, pushes, the woman enters, and the man does 1.5 circles and comes out behind the woman. That's how, and I now do that.
Yeah, it's like Chevy Chase going around the roundabout.
There's not very many revolving doors now that need pushing. Most of them push themselves. And actually, if you do push them, they stop. It's very annoying.
What? There are no...
The ones at work, Jeremy, front of this building, they do that.
No, there's all over the country. There are revolving doors that are not powered. I can tell you that. All right, let's have some calls or messages or anything, really.
Well, let's go for calls first. We'll speak to Paul from Staffordshire first, who thinks you should take turns in who pays.
Oh, hello, Paul.
Good morning, Jeremy, and all the other panel as well.
Oh, well,
yeah, I think whoever, as long as the bill's been paid, I think it doesn't make a difference who pays the bill, as long as the bill's been paid, really, no matter if it's the lady or the gentleman, really. So
when were you last on a date, Paul? When were you last on a date?
Oh, many years ago, a long time ago. But, still single now. You have to look.
I'm sorry to do that. Well, you might be happy about that. Do you remember who paid when you were on the date?
I can't remember. It's a long time. That long time ago. I can't remember that, to be honest.
Maybe.
But like I said, I'd pay the bill, but obviously depends. Split the bill, or like I said, as long as the bill's been paid. Really, that's my view, anyway. You know.
Yeah, I mean, let me get this is a lovely phrase, isn't it?
It is really lovely. I have one male friend who stopped dating for a while because he loves to always pay on a first date, and there was one point where he was just like, I'm not doing any dating.
Well, he ran out of money.
I can't afford it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a dreadful attitude, isn't it? To I'm gonna pay even I've got no money. That's appalling.
Yeah. No.
Storm.
We're going to speak to Tracy from Kent now.
Go on, Tracy.
Hello.
Hello. We're ready. We're ready. Far away.
Hello.
Hi, Tracy. Yep. That's good. We've started.
Okay.
So
if you're invited out on a date, then one should not feel one should split the bill. It should be you're invited out, whether it's a date or a friendship, whatever. one should not have to pay.
So it's who the invitation comes from. So if I invited you on a date, you'd think, right, Jeremy's paying.
Yes.
I think that's fair enough.
You've invited I out. If it's a case of, let's just meet up.
Yeah.
That's a whole different scenario.
I hear you.
But if you're invited...
yes. The issue... Tracy, hang on. These days, what with the internet and digital, I think a lot of this is, Storm, isn't it? It's like two people pair up on a phone.
It's very difficult, and that does get a bit tricky.
It's not, that thing of knocking on the door and would you like to come on a date? That it may be a bit more 50-50 now, Tracy.
Yeah, it could be 50. What I'm saying, if it's not, a date or a friendship, or even saying, hey, Mike down the road, would you like to come out? That's an invitation.
That is an invitation.
So that invitation means,
Mike,
really, I'm paying the stuff.
I've got it. Good old Mike. He's in for a good night, I think. After the break, it's our stories of the day. We'll see you very shortly.
In which year was the first ever YouTube video uploaded? Was it A, in 2004? Was it 2005? Or was it C, 2006? Find out which after the break.
Dominic is my grandson. I did fear for him, the racism, from getting it from black people and white people, but now not so much. Some family members didn't like the police, but they've changed their attitude. They realise that Dom wants to be a policeman and he wants to help make a difference. And he worked hard to get where he is, and I'm very proud of him.
Before the break, we asked in which year was the first ever YouTube video uploaded, and the answer is B. It was in 2005.
Welcome back to the show with Gemma and Albie, and we bring you now our stories of the day. And here's an interesting one. This is in the Telegraph, pops up in the middle of everything else, which is a warning that there could be another right-wing party to rival the Conservatives. And Albie they're saying that basically that's the biggest threat to the Conservatives at the next election.
Yes, absolutely. What's being said here by the think tank Onward is that a really big threat to the Conservative Party at future general elections or even local elections could be a new right-wing party, probably led by Nigel Farage. And obviously at the moment we've got two more culture warrior right-wing parties, the Reform Party and the Reclaim Party, but they haven't really been performing very well in the polls. But what Onward is saying is that at the next general election, if there was a party that could really face the Conservatives, and particularly in the north of the country, they could lose something like 53 seats, particularly in the Red Wall, which would be a big problem for the party if they wanted to win.
They've got Reform, Reclaim, and then this one could be called UKIP.
And this is the thing, it's very hypothetical. They're talking about a party that doesn't exist currently.
It's Farage, basically.
Yeah, well, you see, I hope that Farage has lost a lot of currency recently. He's a Putin apologist, and I think that's probably really exposed what he's all about as well. You know, his links with Russia, his links with Trump. I'm hoping...
What links with Russia?
Well, he is a Putin apologist. He has been on TV only this week, sort of apologising. You know, he has been sticking up for Putin.
What's it? I don't quite get... You can help me with this, Albie. Because I was looking at, in the States, Tucker Carlson is one of their sort of presenters, and he's come out kind of not supporting Putin, but basically making the case for why we shouldn't be
Nigel Farage.
No, but hang on a minute.
Sorry.
I don't understand why on the right there is any sort of affinity with Putin. I don't quite get it.
I've got to be honest with you, Jeremy, I don't really get it either. I find it quite uncomfortable when...
Like Trump, for example, classic
example.
example.
This is what I was just about to come on to.
Yeah.
Trump has been saying that President Putin is some kind of genius. And I think that's giving him far too much currency. I mean, we've seen the Ukrainians give a lot of resistance in this invasion, and I don't think Western leaders praising a tyrant leader is a good thing.
But come back to, what is it about the right? You mentioned Farage, money.
Money. Absolutely.
Do you think
if you look
so?
at our own Tory party is mired in Russian money. We've got the son of a KGB agent in the House of Lords. The Tory party have had £2 million in donations from Russia, which is why it's very, very difficult for Johnson now to take the higher ground. Until he gives that back, this is all proven. This is all out there.
Is she right?
We had Russian interference in the US elections, proven. In the French elections, proven. Brexit, let's face it, there was, because we've got a redacted Russian report that nobody's been allowed to see. So what I'm hoping is that some people, the scales will have fallen from their eyes to see what people like Farage are really motivated
Go on, Albie.
I mean, there's been Russian interference in Western elections for decades, and that's not a new thing. I think when it comes
it's
to...
also not okay.
No, it's not okay. I didn't say it was okay, but I think to say that it's something which has only just happened in the last couple of years is untrue. Now, on the issue about donations to the Conservative Party and the Labour Party, by the way, from people in Russia, we've got to separate Putin's allies from just Russian residents of the United Kingdom who are British citizens, who have the same right to donate to a political party that you or I have.
They do. So why aren't they publishing the names? There is no transparency. And this is what the rest of the world are looking at. And it's unbelievably embarrassing and criticising from not just Europe, but America as well.
I wonder I'm just looking at this from a long way away, but when you look at someone like Trump, and you can see that Trump really likes Putin. I mean, back in the day, he clearly... I wonder if it's not even about money. It's about he just likes a guy who's prepared to use missiles. It's a strongman thing. What do you think?
Yeah, it's very testosterone-driven. I think the
wonder.
link between Trump and Putin is definitely a macho thing. They like the macho-ness in each other. I'm not sure that's the reason to found a friendship.
Utterly unhinged. Putin
maybe.
is a psycho. And, yes, I think Trump is as dangerous.
OK, here's a question. Sorry, a story in the Telegraph. That was a question. Maybe it is a question. Everything's a question now. This is Matt Hancock. And Gemma, he says, I fell in love, but I did not break the law.
Yes, so if
I
you
can't
remember...
believe we're still talking about this wretched thing.
I know. I mean, there's something about this. This is almost... I hate to say it, was quite sweet and funny because, OK, at the time, we saw these pictures of him having a snog, which was more sort of embarrassing than anything. It was all very awkward. He resigned, actually one of the only ones that did resign as a result of doing something that went against their rules, because he was supposed to be social distancing. But he's come out, and what he really wants everybody to know is that this wasn't a casual snog, that he fell in love. That's his thing. And he's trying to sort of point out the difference between, while he regrets the pain that he caused his wife for having an affair, he is with her now, he fell madly in love. And I think he obviously feels it's really important. He wants people to know
It's interesting, Albie, but now in context, Hancock's snog doesn't look as bad, does it? Because of all the parties at Downing Street and all that.
No, absolutely not. I think Matt Hancock absolutely did the honourable thing last year when he was found to have broken the guidelines that his own government set. And obviously since then, we've seen Partygate roll on. We saw the Patterson scandal. We saw everything that was going on with the Peppa Pig sort of gate that happened last year as well. This seems to pale in comparison to what's gone on in government since then.
I wondered whether the reason everyone went mad about Hancock, firstly, there was so much surface tension in the story. Everyone was frustrated. So as soon as somebody does something, they just go crazy. But the other thing is, people, they didn't want to say this, but they didn't approve of him betraying his wife.
Well,
and
I was just going to put, I've
literally,
just as you were looking at me there, I just looked up, is adultery illegal? I couldn't remember whether it was illegal or it was... and it's not illegal, apparently. It's not a crime. Because I was going to contradict him when he said, I didn't break the law. I was like, is it the law? No, turns out it's not. It's just not to be advised.
Were you actually Googling, is adultery illegal?
That's exactly what I Googled.
Oh, my goodness.
The whole of the royal family with the stuff.
Best moment on this show since
but
I
you know
joined
some things...
Is adultery illegal?
But though, you know, some things are illegal, but they never really are enforced. It's just like, you're not allowed to do that. Because you can use it in a divorce, can't you? You can say, well, There was adultery.
Yes, and there are a lot of things that are wrong that are not illegal. So, for example, lying is wrong, but it's not illegal, etc.
And then we wouldn't have anyone in.
Well, exactly. The prisons. We've only got 100,000 places in prison. Can you imagine if adultery was illegal? How big would the prisons have to be?
I thought that'd be quite interesting.
What else have you got in your Google search?
I don't know. We should look it up one day. It would be absolutely fascinating. It would say a lot more about me, I think, than anything else.
Let's have a listen to Matt Hancock.
I resigned because I broke the social distancing guidelines.
Yeah.
By then, they weren't actually rules. They weren't the law. But that's not the point. The point is they were the guidelines that I'd been proposing. And, that happened because I fell in love with somebody.
He's dressing like Steve Jobs. What's that about? The black polo neck. What's going on? Because that's a look, that is.
You know, when Matt Hancock sort of came to the forefront and we all sort of acknowledged his existence, somebody referred to him as he's the boy, the first boyfriend your sister brings home with a car. And I thought it was the perfect way to describe him. And he still feels that way, like he's just trying to get his style, he's trying to get his persona, and he's not quite there yet.
Well, it's interesting because that Gina was hired to help him communicate with more emotional intelligence. That's a lovely little angle.
He did.
Maybe she went too far with the old.
But listen, I think I like a comeback. I don't know about you, Albie, but I just think we don't want everyone to be cancelled forever, destroyed.
Yeah.
If he wants to do a little comeback, why not? Let's see. I'm not saying he should be in the cabinet, but you don't want the guy to be rubbed out, do you? Yeah. Albie, this is a painful one. This is okay. We're on to football now, and Chelsea's my team. But on a bigger issue, much bigger, we've got FIFA and the World Cup and Russia. So tell us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got the World Cup coming up. We've had a number of national football teams say they do not want to play Russia under any circumstances. We've got Poland, Sweden, the Czech Republic. I think the England football team have also said that they don't want to play Russia under any circumstances. But in terms of the stance of FIFA, some people are saying it's been quite feeble because I think there's sort of this suggestion that maybe Russia could still play in the World Cup, but just under a different name. So I don't know if you remember during the Olympics, Russia was competing in the Olympics under, I think it was the Russian Olympic Committee.
It was really weird.
But everyone knew it was Russia.
Yeah.
And I think actually what needs to happen is that Russia needs to be completely kicked out of the global system of arts, sport, finance, trade, to really understand that what is going on in the Ukraine at the moment and the way that Russia has behaved since Georgia in 2008, since Crimea in 2014, and now with the rest of Ukraine in 2022 is totally unacceptable.
And sporting boycotts hurt. We know that from South Africa, that it hurt them much more than we thought at the time. That not being able to field a cricket team and all that. You don't think so? Putin won't be bothered?
I think Putin will probably be bothered. He'll probably be bothered more about sporting, because that's quite testosterone-driven, isn't it? He'll probably be bothered.
I mean, he wants to play the victim, so that'll play into it, but maybe there's no choice.
It's about the Russian people as well, who are fed a lot of misinformation when they suddenly realise the whole world is not approving.
Yeah,
that's very helpful.
So on to the football matters. I was at the Wembley for this Carabao Cup final, and I'd say at the beginning there was a really moving moment, actually, which is where, Liverpool's song is "You'll Never Walk Alone," and they said... They made an announcement that everyone's backing Ukraine and so on. They put up the Ukrainian flag. Liverpool fans started singing "You'll Never Walk Alone," and then Chelsea fans joined in, certainly around me. And I found that incredibly powerful. I was crying. There was then weirdly, someone sort of wellied in with the British national anthem in a completely mistimed. We all had to stop singing because of it. So it was all a little bit of untidy, but there was such a swell of emotion for Ukraine there. And it was great to see, and it was...
the TV man in you irritated that was badly produced?
No, I felt for the person who was singing the national anthem. I thought, you've got to just wait for a minute, because you never hear Chelsea fans singing the Liverpool song. It was so moving, "You'll Never Walk Alone," from the bit of the ground I was in. Yeah. Anyway, on to the football. It was a funny old game. I mean, sorry, we'll just do some classic football here. So the first thing is, it was the best 0-0 game you'll ever see, right? And we'll just have a little look at a clip here. But we kept having goals. They had this goal as disallowed, right? So, and obviously I'm delighted as a Chelsea fan when their goal's disallowed, but this is all rubbish, isn't it, really? The way VAR works. So the referee, there's a decision, and then he comes out, and he just so you can't celebrate goals. So that goes from 1-0 to 0-0. Then there's the moment when Chelsea score, and that's disallowed as well. And then we get to this extraordinary. Oh, should we see this? Let's just have a look. It's another one disallowed. There, look at this. What are we doing? What are we doing? Anyway, then it comes to penalties, and every single outfield player scores, meaning it's 10-10. Their goalkeeper scores. This is where the goalkeepers take the penalty. Then Kepa, the Chelsea goalkeeper, I mean, the pressure on him, he hasn't saved any of their shots, and now he just has to score to make it 11-11, and no.
He missed the goal.
Oh, yeah.
That's the bit that I couldn't...
But I just think it's just the agony of that.
Before that, I had actually turned to my other half and said, has anyone in a penalty shootout, remember these are highly skilled athletes, has anyone ever missed the goal? And he went, oh yeah. I thought,
loads.
Oh, that must be embarrassing.
Well, because you're desperate not to be saved, because for them being saved is a miss, so you're desperate to power it in. Anyway, I don't know, to be honest, the football pales into insignificance compared to the whole political background, doesn't it? But it was a cracking old night of football. And there's the other issue of who owns Chelsea, and that's ongoing as well. Oh, my goodness. Talk about something else, Storm.
Yes, OK, well, I'm going to take you to Wiltshire, and I'm going to take you to a rather ripped-up road that apparently drivers are still using. I just want to show you a picture of this, because it is quite spectacular. You'd be forgiven for thinking that this was caused by an earthquake.
Wow.
They actually don't know what has caused this. So currently the council are looking into it. Some people think it's been getting worse and worse over the last year. Some people say that Storm Eunice really tore it up when she hit. But look at that. I mean, it's cracked. Some of this road is at a 45-degree angle, and cars are still trying to get down it, despite it being closed since February the 17th. Anyway, it could cost millions to fix. This is the B4069, if you know that one.
B4069.
Yeah, it doesn't actually give you a name of the road. It's just the B4069. I'm sure it'll be given a nice name when it gets fixed, if it ever does get fixed.
The thing of when drivers see a sign saying road closed, but they go on, you know, I'm always amazed. Do you ever do that? Are you always tempted to do that if you drive?
I'm not actually a driver, but when I have been in cars with people, I'm always the one sitting in the passenger seat saying, no, don't go down this road, because I'm worried because something like that might happen.
But you know, classically with floods, that it says, you know, road closed, and people thought, I'll give it a go. You know, they always do, and then their car gets stranded.
Stuck. Shocker.
Yeah.
I don't know who does that. If the road says closed, I just take the diversion.
Well, because sometimes the road closed signs are up after the floods disappeared. That's the thing.
True,
and also there's a 20-mile diversion.
By the sounds of things, this has been a slow burner for quite a while.
Yeah.
It's just got to the point now where that looks undrivable.
We do need film of someone driving down it. That's the one thing I think
we'll just watch the wacky races.
More stories of the day coming after the break, when we'll find out about Trump's hints at a 2024 election run and the Hemingway novel that's received a rather fishy trigger warning. See you very soon.
The name Shrek is derived from the German word Schreck. But what does it mean? A, fright, B, roar, or C, huge? Find out which after this short break. Before the break, we asked, the name Shrek is derived from the German word Schreck, but what does it mean? And the answer is A, fright.
Welcome back to the show with Gemma and Albie. Don't forget, we are on air until 12:15. Storm will be taking your calls in a moment on whether we have a duty to house Ukrainian refugees. 0207 862 2222. Taking your calls on that now. Let's get back to our stories of the day. And in the Mirror, this is about travel forms. It's all, you know, it's the post-COVID moment we're in now. It's all going, isn't it, Albie? It's amazing.
I mean, it's fantastic. I was in Italy last week, and I was really annoyed that I had to fill out one of these passenger locator forms when I was flying back into Gatwick last Monday. And the travel industry has been absolutely decimated by COVID. So anything which is going to help people, you know, go out of the country on holiday, go and visit their families, go and enjoy their lives again is going to help the travel industry. And I think all of these bits of bureaucracy, which I don't know really what they contributed to during COVID in the first place, getting rid of them for the good of the travel industry and for the good of the British public is a good thing.
So essentially, these are forms that travellers complete before entering Britain. And I guess there would be some Spanish families coming here. I'm thinking Spain's involved, but I don't know why. Just it's Easter break. but going away, filling them out, all goes, Gemma. Is that good?
Yeah, I think so. It seems ridiculous. If we've dropped everything, which we have, why do you still have to fill out that form? It doesn't make any sense to me. And as you say, that the travel industry has been clobbered. All of this stuff does put off many people from travelling. There will still be people that haven't seen their relatives, etc. So I think it should go because everybody coming in from other countries have got precautions. We're the country that have taken away masks and all precautions. So why do we care if people are coming in from Spain and Italy where they've got precautions?
Yeah, but I'm just thinking we could be hit by another variant, and we want to keep some defences up.
That is an absolute possibility, but I don't think you can get rid of all the defences and keep that one. That just is nonsensical.
But what would a passenger locator form do to stop a new variant?
Yeah, what does it do to stop a variant? It doesn't do anything. I mean, you are just filling out a form.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's just, they don't even check it.
What's amazing to me, so this football game I was at, there was a bit of a train cancelled, and I had to get a cab, and the cab guy said, "Oh my goodness, it's the busiest day we've had for 2 years." He said, "The sun's out, everyone has suddenly decided COVID's gone. That day, yesterday, Sunday was the day." Isn't that amazing?
I actually went out and thought, oh, spring has sprung. Yeah. So it did. It felt like everybody had just popped out of the ground. Just everybody was outside having a good time.
And at Wembley, 100,000 people, and I hardly saw any masks. Hardly any at all, you know. It may be good. But
it could come back to bite us.
Well, I know, and I feel for our viewers who've been shielding and who are more worried than ever, you know. Gemma, in The Guardian. Right. Donald Trump, back on the block. What's he doing?
Yeah, OK, so he's hinting at his 2024 presidential bid. He's done a massive U-turn because he's always been rather pro-Putin, describing him as smart and, you know, they were like buddies and all of that kind of stuff. And then I think he suddenly had a look at what the rest of the world is thinking. And obviously, even within the Republican Party, people are like, Putin's a nutter. And actually, whilst Biden did terribly over Afghanistan, it has been great that he's been in charge right now.
Biden?
And not Trump. Yeah, Biden.
Do you agree with that? I literally haven't heard anyone say that in the world.
I've not really heard.
I haven't heard anyone say it's good that Biden's in charge.
Right now?
Yeah.
When I was listening to him do his address the other day, I just thought, him or Trump right now.
Oh, I see.
Biden.
Well, that's different, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was
But Trump's argument is, under George Bush, Russia invaded Georgia. Under Obama, Russia took Crimea. Under Biden, Russia invaded Ukraine. I'm the only president on the 21st century on whose watch Russia didn't invade anyone. Yeah, and that's quite a good argument, isn't it?
I mean, it's definite. I mean, it's the truth. It's, you know, he's said it right there. I think there's definitely still some questions up in the air about whether or not Putin would have invaded Ukraine if Trump was in power. I think all the evidence points to Putin being very unpredictable. So I think to make that argument, it's a bit tricky, in my opinion. But, you know, two madmen in power, would one madman think, oh, there's another madman over there, I don't know what he's going to do, so I'm not going to be as aggressive.
And I agree with that, but my overall feeling is that one madman is enough to deal with without two. And
it's a tricky, I agree. Yeah. It's like my neighbour opposite, this isn't true, has got a very dangerous dog. The best thing I can do is also get a very dangerous dog. Yeah. But, I mean, it means the chances of me being attacked by two dogs now.
Exactly.
Let's have a look at what Trump actually said.
But they're going to find out the hard way starting on November 8th, and then again even more so on November 2024. They will find out like never before. We did it twice. And we'll do it again. We're going to be doing it again a third time.
So that's the false claim that he won the election, he lost.
So that is, you know, such a massive lie to democracy.
It's
we
wrong.
are all supporting Ukraine because they are democracy over an autocracy. And, you know, let's not forget what he incited and those people storming into the Capitol. I mean, what a few years it's been for news. And we sat there going, wow. And that was Trump.
But that hasn't cancelled him. He may win the election in 2 years.
He may well win the election. I think if he gets the Republican nomination, which I think if he does stand for it, he will almost certainly get it. He's a huge electoral asset for the Republican Party and holding together this new coalition of Republicans. And, you know, I really, really hate this whole thing about lying about the election, saying we're going to do it a third time. Trump lost the election in the States by the same margin that Hillary Clinton lost the election that Trump won in. And yet there are still Republicans trying to say, you know, we won that election. They didn't.
And although Zelensky has now slightly put me more in favour of taking politicians from TV shows, because of course Trump was from The Apprentice. The Ukrainian president was the voice of the Ukrainian Paddington and won Strictly.
He was a comedian, but as I know, my brother's a comedian. Comedians are very serious people. They're
and
often
smart, quick thinkers. You have to be really, really on it if you're going to be a comedian.
There's a great story in the Times, Albie, about Hemingway and this very famous book called The Old Man and the Sea. What's happened?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's his famous book, The Old Man and the Sea, where I think it's about, I've never actually heard of it before, to be honest, Jeremy, but I did speak about it yesterday. But essentially, people are getting upset because it's quite a graphic novel about a fishing escapade where a man sort of has to wrestle this huge marlin for about 3 days, I think it is. And now university lecturers want to put a trigger warning on it because they think it's going to upset students. And I think what this story in the Times is trying to build into is that the young people and the students of today are all snowflakes and they need to be cushioned from the world. But actually, I'm not too against this, and I'm normally against cancel culture myself, but I'm not too against trigger warnings.
Really?
Because all trigger warnings do is they give people the information to make the choice which is right for them. So why should we get angry at that?
Gosh, I didn't think you'd say that. We should get angry at it because I don't need a third party to tell me their view of this book. I don't who's writing the trigger warning, I suppose. The trigger warning. I don't know. That's really interesting that you think they're okay.
I'm with Albie on this because I think there's a lot of hype about this. It's not saying don't read it, and it's not saying take it out the library.
It's saying scenes of violence to a fish.
Saying, so it's a bit like if you were on the radio and you were talking about something really sensitive about sexual assault, you might just say, look, for anybody listening...
No, it's not. It's not like that at all. I'm sorry. A fishing expedition is not the same as sexual assault.
But if it was for animal abuse, then, for example, if you're about to show a graphic image of an animal being abused, I mean, this marlin is being dragged by a fishing rod for 3 days and is
got quite involved in it now.
I know. I mean, I know that it is a fictional story, but it's a trigger warning. It's not telling someone not to watch it. It's just telling someone this is happening in this particular book or film, and therefore, if you don't want to watch it, that is your choice.
Pictures are different from words, for goodness sake.
I agree with you. I've read The Old Man and the Sea a long time ago. Can't remember much about it. Yeah, a long time ago. And this is the thing, you could go back and go, oh, I'm seeing it through new eyes. I don't know. But my problem more with it is that it even becomes a story, because I think it's all part of this get people to be angry about things that you shouldn't bother being angry about.
Yeah, maybe so. It's interesting to hear you say that, though, Albie. I mean, where are you on trigger warning?
Extreme fishing is a trigger warning. I get sexual assault. I get lots of different things on books for trigger warning. I don't get the fishing one. When you pick up a book, The Old Man and the Sea, and it's about a fisherman, you've got to think, oh, some fish may die in this book. Like, there has to be that sort of logic. And if there isn't, then it's probably too advanced for you as a book anyway.
Maybe it's for the fishing industry who have been decimated in recent years.
Well, I think that's the point. I think there is, because it's a big fishing community, it's Inverness, isn't it? So, yeah, that's part of it. OK, well, that's fascinating. I feel like I'm getting more woke every second here. Gemma, in the Sun, Prince Andrew, we have to mention him again. What's happened now?
So when I come on, I like to be outraged by at least one thing every show. I'm going to go with this today, Jeremy.
Oh, right, you left it late.
I'm furious and I'm outraged. No, actually, I am. I'm not even kidding. This is gross. So basically, MPs have been barred from probing whether public money helped Prince Andrew pay off his sex accuser. This is awful, and they're very, very ancient rules, and it means that you can't discuss royalty in the Commons. So a Labour MP is saying, well, hang on a minute, we need to confirm that none of the sovereign grant has been used in this manner to pay off this, well, we all know, Virginia Giuffre. And we can't know. Now, it's £12 million, the amount, and I just think, it's so murky and disgusting, this story, and absolutely no public money should have been used.
I mean, I'm assuming they won't have used any public money, because how would you get that through the accounts? I guess it's the Queen has helped. He's had to sell his, was it Verbier? He had this chalet and everything.
But again, there's no transparency.
But interestingly, what seems to have happened is that they've basically set the compensation at the exact amount of money he had. So he's got nothing left at all. He was worth about 12 million, apparently. I mean, what do you think? You
were about to ask me if I feel sorry for Andrew.
No, I wasn't.
The answer was probably going to be
so well.
No.
I was toying with that, and I did immediately cancel the thought.
I think we know the answer to that one.
I did see the story today in another paper saying that he's broken And the Queen feels so bad about what's happened to him because he can't keep, he's a walking embarrassment, that she's let him keep one title, which is Vice Admiral. And someone said if he wants to walk around in private in a Vice Admiral's uniform once in a while, we're not going to stop him.
I think he would do that if he kept it or he didn't keep the title.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, he has been properly destroyed.
This is
Do you
the
feel
problem.
bad for him, though,
That's the
Jeremy?
problem, is him thinking that this has happened to him.
I think the thing is that he's being royal in the way people were 100, 200 years ago, where they could do anything and no one would ever ask. And he's suddenly hit the brick wall of modern culture, which is where, wait a minute, if you've got a free top hat, we want to hear what you're doing, you know, with your life, both publicly and privately. And it's just that the collision of the two things has destroyed him, you know.
I think if you're 61 and you're only just realising there's consequences to actions.
Well, there weren't for hundreds of years. I mean, if you were royal, you wouldn't have any consequences to anything.
I know, he's utterly entitled and he probably feels really sorry for himself, as if the whole world has really done him a disservice. This is terribly unfair. I was only having a bit of fun. You know, all of those awful things.
Well,
I really don't think he's contrite. And that isn't good enough.
No, but I think the trouble is once he's involved in a legal thing, if you were advising his PR, you'd say, look, sit down, talk to camera and say, I'm a wreck, I'm an idiot, I'm a fool, I don't deserve any public profile, and I'm going to, for the rest of my life, work in a soup kitchen, and that's the end you're hearing of me, right? Mm-hmm. The trouble is, once he says all that, then Virginia Giuffre's lawyers say, right, at last he's conceded that he attacked her, and now we want to go to a full criminal trial.
And I think you're right. People have a lot of room in their hearts for forgiveness. You know, so there was a time people were furious with Matt Hancock. Time passes. You go, oh, he fell in love. He had a snog. This is different. I'm not comparing the two events. No. Prince Andrew what he's done is vile and unforgivable. But you're right. He hasn't shown anything that even allows you to feel a bit sorry for him.
No, I know. But again, we say allegedly because what do we got? We got a photo of him with his arm round Virginia. But then again, he was 40 and she was 17.
Yeah, I think it's more the going to Epstein's house after a conviction.
Oh, but to break off their friendship, remember?
To break off their friendship, having to stay for several days, and then being caught at the doorway saying goodbye to a young woman. It all just smells a bit fishy.
Oh, well, listen, we're going to trigger warning on that as well. Albie, in the Telegraph, the stealth tax on landlords. Landlords facing tricky times at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Some UK councils are looking to reclassify rental homes with renting out multiple bedrooms to multiple occupancy homes as opposed to single occupancy. So that could see some council tax bills be quadrupled.
Wow.
Which is huge.
It is huge.
And of course, those costs are going to be passed on to renters because the landlords aren't going to be paying. They're not going to be paying for those individual council tax bills.
Amazing.
And renters are being clobbered at the moment.
Yeah, if your kids come back from university and decide they're going to live with you, whether you then get hit from an individual council tax for every single person. Amazing. Gemma, in the Times, pharmacists, and just, again, we're being told, please use your pharmacist as your doctor.
Yeah, so the main root problem that we have is we have a huge shortage of GPs. GPs are working all hours that God sends and struggling, and that is why there's an increase in Zoom appointments and all of that. So basically, apparently, if people utilised their pharmacists, rather than having to be referred by their GP practice or NHS 111 to go there for a healthcare consultation, if you just could do that, it could save the NHS £640 million and obviously save GPs quite a lot of time as well. So it would help the issue. I was having dinner with a GP, which is one of my friends, on Friday, and she was a bit like, oh, she's always exhausted. She'd had one woman in 1 week see her 3 times to talk about her mother travelling on holiday. She was just like, it's just a nightmare.
What do you mean?
They get a lot of
booking
time
in who don't have a
basically
problem.
a complete and utter time waster, you know. And she was just like, the way we're running it at the moment, it's just you end up, you don't want to be rude, but you know. I think there's got to be certain constraints, and perhaps if people can go to a pharmacy and have a question, that's a really good idea.
I'd just say if you're under 50, all GP appointments are on Zoom, unless you have a broken spine.
Well, you've got to be really careful with that.
I think you've got to be careful.
Yeah, if you're going to see a mole
I'm 56. I'd be happy. No, I'm happy to show a mole on camera.
A lump.
I'm
if
happy
you're going to have a prostate, you've got to be there in person.
Yeah, but the problem is you can't get an appointment. So I'd rather show the lump on camera, depending on its location.
Would the location matter?
Well, we've all got a doctor friend. The doctor friend I've got said as soon as they started this thing of send us your lumps, blokes were using it for the wrong reasons. They said we've collected. But it's amazing, isn't it? Blokes, I wonder if you'd have a look at this. You know, it's not good, really.
Are you kidding?
So yeah, just you know, and you got. I know. Let's not.
Men do better.
Men do better. All right. And I know you're talking about this later.
Well, we're talking about something very, very similar. We're sort of sticking with this topic and moving on Jeremy Vine Extra. We're asking if it's okay for GPs to stick with online appointments rather than us seeing them face to face. 0207 862 2222 is the number. We'd love to hear from you, so get those calls coming in now.
All right, give us the shaggy dog story.
Yes, there's a dog story in the papers, so it falls upon my shoulders to tell you the news. I don't know if you remember, but back in 2020, the Kennel Club registered a vulnerable list of dog breeds, and in one of those dog breeds was the Old English Sheepdog, and we actually had a sheepdog on the show, Sky, who's a beautiful pup. That isn't how big they get much bigger than that. She had a lot of growing to do. But beautiful. All dogs are beautiful, but Sky was particularly gorgeous. Anyway, I think we did our bit because they're slowly coming off the vulnerable list. People are changing the types of breeds of dogs that they're buying, and Old English Sheepdogs are going up in popularity now, along with other dogs as well, including what do we have? Setters, white setters, Irish red setters. These are still on the vulnerable list, but generally there's been a move towards bigger dogs because I think people are moving out of the city since COVID, so you don't need to have a smaller dog. They've got a bigger garden, so they feel they can do that. Just a word of warning, they do need a lot of exercise dogs, whether they're big or small.
Yeah, that's a very good point. OK, well, listen, thank you. That's it for Stories of the Day. Don't go anywhere. The conversation continues after the break on Jeremy Vine Extra with Storm.
Yeah, we're here for another hour, so more of your calls. I'm going to be joined by Matt Stadlin and Lucy Beresford. We'll be discussing the situation in Ukraine and asking whether we have a duty to take in refugees. We'd love your calls also on whether we should change the national maximum speed limit to 50 miles per hour. They're doing it in Wales, so should they do it across the UK? Get your calls coming in now. 0207 862 2222 is the number you need. We'd love to hear from you.
And thank you so much to Gemma and Albie for joining us. Great to see you for the first time, Albie. Storm is back after this short break.